Hey everyone, welcome to the show Handing the Shame Back. I'm Gloria Masters, I'm your host, and each week I get the privilege of bringing you a survivor. So before we launch into this week's episode, I wanted to advise a trigger warning first. By the very nature of the show, this content is about child sexual abuse. If you struggle, if you get triggered, please do stop watching, go to the show notes below, and you'll be directed to some resource and support. In the meantime, I've got a wonderful man for you to hear his story and perhaps learn from him. One thing he may say may completely change how you view your own story and your own history, and it's so positive to know that's possible. His name is Keith Williams. He's a survivor. He comes from Haverhill, or he's living in Haverhill, which is near Cambridge, all the way over in England. And it's a pleasure to welcome him to the show. Welcome on board, Keith.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's great to have you here. So I guess in no particular order, whatever it is you're comfortable to share with us about your personal childhood story of sexual abuse, would be grateful to know.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose so. My childhood sexual abuse was sibling sexual abuse from my brother, and it's funny really because it's only since I disclosed back in 2021 during COVID, and it was, I don't know, it was a very strange time, but looking back now, and as more time goes forward, I look back often, because each day that goes past, I suppose you do look back and think and see the past as from slightly different angles. Relationships with my family and things was when I grew up, from very young, it was just me and my brother and my mum. My dad left when I was 6 months old, so it was just the three of us. My mum and my dad and my older brother, they moved to Haverhill from London during the 70s for what I call the London overspill. And so a lot of people from London were being relocated with jobs and things like that in Haverhill. It was a new town that was being built up from the ground sort of upwards. And, you know, my dad got offered a job where they relocated him house and everything as well, and so on and so forth. I must admit, I don't remember too much about sort of early days. Not until probably I was sort of, sort of primary school age, maybe, sort of 5, 6, 7 and upwards. I always enjoyed drawing, still do. I was always quite artistic. That was always my sort of, I don't know, my own place where I could just switch off. And even at a young age, I was, I enjoyed it. I suppose the relationship between me and my brother back then, from the outside looking in, everybody would always think that we were sort of super close, super tight, which was true in some ways. We were very close. We did used to have a lot of laughs and things like that. But I suppose, there's maybe always other things behind closed doors, so to speak. And it's, when you bury that over a number of years and over again for year on year, it sort of, you learn just to cope. You learn just to, I don't know, exist without it more than anything.
Yeah. Can I ask you, Keith, two things? just because it's helpful for our survivors to know. Hello, survivors, by the way. Great to see you here. How old were you when the abuse began?
Um, so I was about 7,
About 7. And how much older, like what was the age difference between you and your brother?
about 4.5 years.
Okay. Yeah. And that was to go on until you were how old?
About 12.
Yeah. Yes. So there's no way he could not know what he was doing.
No.
No. How did you talk about this, it was your mum raising you basically. Um,
Hmm.
do you feel there was any way she could have suspected or wondered? I'm sure your behaviour would have changed at the age of 7.
Yes. Um, I wasn't a child who, I was always considered to be a lively child, let's say. Um, you know, now, back then, they used to call it sort of a bit hyperactive. Now it's probably, I have been diagnosed with ADHD, but back then there wasn't a diagnosis for that. There wasn't anything that was clinically sort of anything that could make you sort of be more aware of how that would manifest. Um, yeah, so I wasn't one to be sort of in trouble a lot. I was either one way or the other. I was either full on 90 miles an hour, or I was just sitting still
Yeah,
in my own sort of
yeah,
company in my own world.
yeah. And so what changed for you when the abuse began in terms of your behavior, I guess, or personality?
Um, it's interesting. I mean, I used to have nightmares growing up. I used to wet the bed. Lots of things that back then in that time frame in that era were just considered to be, just a phase you was going through.
Mm,
Um, it was not unfortunately back then not enough for people to, or my mum to acknowledge or to see what it was in the scale it could have been noticed, and to actually then ask a few more questions. And I do look back on that now and do think about that now and think, I've got children myself. I've got two. They're all growing up, but you know I've sort of thought about that a lot. That I just can't see how she didn't know anything was happening. And that's hard. It's hard. It's hard to think about, and it's hard to acknowledge. But the more time goes on, the more I do think that was the case. And maybe the consequences of that back then, it would have been, we both would have been taken away, put into care, so on and so forth. And bless her, she was doing the best she could at the time. She had 3 jobs herself, making ends meet, so to speak. Sometimes through sort of detriment to our own health. But there were things that, you know situations and things that I used to get involved with probably just because my brother had to look after me a lot, and if you're going out, I'll take your brother with you, you know. And I think it created a lot of resentment and things. And even while the abuse was going on, that was all sort of, situations. He was very manipulative. He was very coercive. Very sort of Jekyll and Hyde-ish. That sort of thing. So it's you was constantly on eggshells, really.
yeah, and that's a sign you're with a narcissist actually, or borderline as well, is when you feel like you're walking on eggshells, you
Mm.
can't be who you are. You can't be yourself, can you? Because it doesn't feel safe. Mm,
That's right. That's right.
mm,
And yeah, I mean, some of the situations. He was very clever. He was very clever. He is a very clever person, very intellectually clever, but very manipulative. And it was. We always say, my family and things, my wife and things. He was very, very, very under the radar, just enough to have to influence how you behave, things you do, things you agree to, things you don't agree to, and so on and so forth. Very, very clever. But not with the same. Not with from a it's just in a horrible way.
Yeah. Do you, as obviously you're a dad yourself now,
Yes,
and you think about your amazing kids when they were of a similar age, and you realize, I imagine, Keith, that what child of 7 has any autonomy or ability to say no or stop anything?
correct. Yeah, 100%. And if we used to play a lot of sports together and things, he was one of those sort of people that would, be naturally gifted. Let's just say good at something, even if he'd never tried it before. Okay, especially on sort of sports from a sports angle and that sort of stuff. But if, let's say, on a very, very, very rare occasion, not even necessarily just an actual sport in life, just sort of like maybe a game we've made up or something. He was probably sort of super competitive, and if on the odd occasion, if maybe I always say, the planets align, and I sort of managed to sort of be close to beating him at some sort of game or something, it just completely changed. And threaten me with things like sort of pull cues, and and he'd never actually hit me with them, but it was enough in your face, waving, and just the look in his eyes and things, and it just stops you in your tracks, and that doesn't go, that stays for the next months and months, and if you have that situation in the end, repeatedly throughout your life, and then doubled up with the abuse as well, and that's what it is. It's that's where you are. He's got you where he wants you, because it's that constant change of, you do what I say, or this will happen. My abuse was never used as a consequence. It was always used slightly in the reverse, in terms of sort of like a. It's horrible to say, but in kind of like a reward, and it's quite sort of, I don't know. Yeah, it's just a bit bizarre, really.
Well, it would do your head in, because how confusing is
Oh, 100%.
how
100%.
is that? And I think that's one of the things. Thank you, by the way, Keith. You're doing a great job. But I think that's one of the things we don't often talk about, is the confusion that exists. It's not just fear, and it's not always guilt. Sometimes it's actually just being really confused, because suddenly you're in a situation where the abuse is there, and it's almost like you're somehow complicit in it, without ever really realizing you've just been groomed into that situation.
Yes, yes. And it wasn't until after I disclosed, and through sort of counselling and therapy and things, that was probably one of the things that probably, even now, and I disclosed in 2021, as I said, coming out of COVID. That's like four and a bit years later, and some days, you still have moments where you have a bit of a flash of a moment in your mind, and you just think, you know, it's, I don't know, did I play a part in that? And it's, it's not something that you didn't, you didn't, but there's just I don't know. just a very, 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 very tiny question mark, should I say, in the depth of your brain, in the pit of the abyss in the middle of nowhere, that sort of like just taps you on the shoulder every now and again, you know?
And look, I understand that, and I think it's important to unpack it because our amazing survivors watching some will be able to directly connect with what you're describing, because they've had a situation or situations that reflect that. So I think it's important for us, if you're comfortable, to look at that a little more in depth. You know, being part of the abuse and being amenable to it do not equate to actually giving consent, because we're not talking about a 17-year-old or a 20-year-old. We're talking about a 7-year-old, and this is when the abuse began. So regardless of the fact it went on for 5 years, Keith, every time it occurred, the psychological state goes back to the first time. Yeah?
Yes.
So your cognition and your ability to grasp what was occurring will remain at 7. I don't know if you knew that, but that's a
No.
fact. So when I ask you again to consider children at 7, what part of them fully understanding what was going on or being able to give consent to that which they didn't understand was them being complicit in it or agreeing to it?
Yeah, 100%.
So I think it's important we consider that, because there's a lot out there who have had this experience as small children, which I consider a 7-year-old to be, um, to the point where they're thinking, yes, but I went along with it because it was easier and I didn't feel I had a choice. Hello, translate that, please. There was no consent given. It was survival. Because can you imagine if you had said, no, don't do it, I don't want it, I don't like it? Imagine then the consequences of that. So again, we look at, was this fully understood? No. Was consent able to be given then if it wasn't fully understood? No. Did you feel at those times that you didn't really have a choice? Yes. Now, can you see then how even though a small part of the brain might pick up and highlight, oh, you were probably, oh, there was a part of you. Yeah, of course there was a part. There was a survival part of you that needed to get through this as easily as possible so you weren't going to be subjected to horror in terms of physical violence or even kind of mental, psychological abuse.
Yeah.
Love to know what you think of all of that. It's just the world according to gloriamasters.com.
Yeah. Um, I think that's looking back, like I said, there was no way I could there was no possible way. The grooming was done in such a, like I say, in such a under the radar way that there was, I wasn't even aware it was going on. It was, when you hear the phrase like someone's playing the long game, this was done in small drip amounts over a long period of time, from when I was, before I could even remember, without even relating anything to the abuse. And it's hard because then you think of sort of, other siblings growing up and everything else, and it's really difficult because not all siblings have that sort of pattern, or that sort of hierarchy, sort of power struggle between one older sibling and the other. It's not just because we were siblings. I think it was just how he was, and you know, it was just in so many situations, and yes, with the actual abuse, that was myself. but his manipulative behaviour and his sort of coerciveness and things like that sometimes just sort of, you know, rippled through to other friends that he had that we both knew together and things like that. And even one of his closest friends, you know, it's not until since after I disclosed and things like that, and I'm still good friends with this particular person, and you know, and even he looks sort of back on his relationship, like his sort of friendship that he had with my brother, and thinks it just makes sense. There were so many situations that they had that weren't necessarily, they weren't sexual in any way, you know, but just in a general sort of two people hanging out, growing up, you know, enjoying sports and music and things like that. But even so, you can look back, and that was one of the things after I disclosed, you know, myself, my wife, you know, all sort of, you look back on time and think, yeah, you know, especially for the people that when it wasn't them, when it was me, they look back and then think, God, that explains, oh, that makes sense, you know. Yeah, it was just, yeah, you just, you're right. When you said, like, you know, yeah, there was no way I could have given consent. There was no way I even knew it was happening, if I'm honest. And you know, and I think the thing with him was, you know, not only was there sexual abuse, there was, like you said, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, and he was just a bit of a law to himself, to be honest. And if he, you know, he could sort of, in effect, steer me down a path or a particular situation, where it was kind of a win-win for him, because if he manipulated me into a situation or something like that that wasn't necessarily sexual or anything like that, it was even something, let's say, I don't know, to do something that we would normally as a child consider, I'm not supposed to do that, you know, my mum's going to be quite annoyed, that's not good behaviour. For him, that was like a like a bartering point. That was like a piece of ammunition that he had that he could use later down the line, to give him all the power. So then, when there was an opportunity, and I sort of, like, I did have odd occasions where I had enough strength and enough energy, and I'd had enough. And I used, and you know, going through, I think I must have been probably 9 or 10, that I would get moments where you'd think, I'm going to stand up to him, you know, and say to him, right, I'm gonna tell my mum, sort of thing. I'm going to tell mum, so to speak. But then he'd come back at you with all of these different situations. Well, I'll tell mum that this happened and that happened, and you did this and you did that and you did this. And so, what do? You don't say anything, because the fear of that is far greater. And what goes through your head when you're that little is the fact that, you know, you're going to be taken away from your mum, you're going to be taken away from your house and your family and everything else, and so nothing comes out.
Well, it can't. It can't. And again, with hindsight, as adults who have survived this, we understand, don't we? There is no voice. It's just impossible in a situation like that. Do you believe he was either probably preceding you or after you, he was abusing other children and throughout his life?
Interesting, because so, going back, probably it's hard to put a timeline on it, but about 7 years before COVID. So let's do the maths, because COVID is a global thing that happened everywhere. But yeah, so about 7 years before COVID. So what's that sort of? What's it? 2012. It's about 2004, something like that. Is it 7? Yeah, around that sort of time. My mum basically got dementia, and I was looking after my mum as she progressed through the illness. She's in a home now, but as she progressed through the illness, she'd have sort of days where I would take her to appointments and things. And I remember taking to an eye appointment at the hospital, and I pick her up and drove her there and then drop her back. She wasn't safe to drive. And when I turned up to my mum's house, my brother's shoes were on the mat, just inside the door at the back door. And I said to my mum, "Oh, are you ready?" sort of thing. And she came through and whispered, sort of like sort of did this and sort of thing. And I said, "Why is my brother here?" She said, "Oh, don't say anything. I can't say anything. Let's go." So anyway, so we left, locked the door, everything else. So I got in the van. Now you got to bear in mind she was early, sort of mid-onset dementia at that point. And I said, "So what's happened? Why is he there?" And she said, "Well, I don't quite know. I don't quite understand." She was a bit confused, bless her heart. And she sort of like said, some people come to the house, took some things, and and now he can't go back to the house and he's got to stay here. So we were sort of like, we can't work this out. And I got home, and obviously she did the appointment. I took her back, and my brother was in the living room on the sofa on the couch, asleep. My mum thought he took an overdose. At that point, I didn't know anything. Now, even though, and I suppose I said, even though he was there, I still wasn't in a position to disclose. It was buried. So, long story short, another situation happened between his children. His children had to go to my mum's. They used to go to his mum's, my nieces, and basically have dinner there sometimes. And when I dropped my mum off, she said, "Oh, your nieces are coming. He's going to have to leave." So I said, "Oh, right, okay. Well, I better." She said, "You better go." So I said, "Okay." So I went. I didn't ask any questions. I left.
Oh.
There's not many situations where you think to yourself that needs to happen. And so I got home and I chatted with my wife about it and said, it's really strange. And over a couple of days, we sort of put two and two together and thought, this is bad. And then my mum had another appointment. It turned out that basically the people that came to the house was the police, and the stuff they took away was obviously anything that had internet access. And so he got arrested for possession of indecent images of children. He got an 18-month suspended sentence and what I call a community order. First offence. He lost his job. His marriage obviously broke down. And he relocated. And within 18 months, he was living with a new lady, and they got engaged, they got married, and he had another child within a space of 2 years.
Do you believe your nieces were at risk? Is that
No,
you don't? Okay.
no. They were interviewed by the police and everything else, and no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't know, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
The reality is with some of these predators, they don't stop.
No.
They don't
And
stop offending or looking for children. And we know that up to 85% of those who source online exploitation material, child sexual abuse material, up to 85% of them, Keith, then go on to search for, groom, and then offend or sexually abuse a child. So this is not just looking at material.
no.
Huge amount go on to actually take it further. So another question then for you, if you're okay, is why did the abuse stop? Was it you that stopped it when you were 12?
I think I got older.
Okay. Oh, so you aged out. He wasn't interested in you anymore. That would
I
have
think
been
so.
bizarre for you, was it? Just so confused. I'm so confused for you as that kid.
Yeah, I think I got probably more friends. I got more social. I wasn't as sort of vulnerable, into an easy target, let's say, easy prey. And then I started sort of, I learned martial arts and things like that, and I used to swim a lot and all this sort of thing. So, there was a shift. There was a shift.
Yes.
He was still very troubled. He got with his wife, and then moved out quite quickly.
Okay.
But at the same time, my mum had a relationship with a gentleman who ended up moving in. She was with him for 10 years. And he was what I would call a stereotypical sort of alpha male. And he, you know, he wouldn't sort of, there was no possible way he was going to be manipulated by my brother, where my brother had manipulated my mum and ruled the roost for his whole life. He did whatever he wanted, or not. And so it was his patch, basically. And the gentleman moving in, we became close and stuff. And, I sort of treated him as a bit of a father figure. And then my brother sort of got together with his wife back then. Wasn't with her that long, to be fair. And then they got engaged and they got married. They moved out, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow. Wow. Gosh, and I guess for you, you say it was 2021, 4.5 years ago when you spoke the unspeakable
Yes.
and found your voice. Congratulations. People don't realize how challenging that can be. And for survivors watching, if you haven't yet found your voice, don't push it. When it's your time, you will know it because you won't be able to stop. Your voice will find its strength. So, was there a catalyst for you in finally speaking out about this, Keith?
Um, it's interesting how you've put that, really, because that I can relate to that. I mean, about sort of 2 or 3 years, maybe 3, 4 years prior to me disclosing, I had moments where things like flashbacks, memories, would become more and more frequent and more and more, more and more vivid. And you can bat them away like you always do, but the length of time before they come back again, it shortens. And whether that was because I was settled in my own life, I had my wife, we had a family, I felt safe, felt secure, and I think maybe my body, my brain, it knew that. I had a couple of moments where it nearly came out. I nearly sort of told my wife, but then it just wasn't the right time. And we've spoken about that situation even now after I disclosed fully. But yeah, it was COVID that sort of did it for me. I think because of the everyone was isolated and everything else. For me, I felt super safe.
Yes.
The people I had around me was the people I cared about the most. And there was, subconsciously, I think that's just naturally how it came about. There was a documentary on the TV here, which was also about some male survivors who'd been abused by their football coach, soccer coach,
Yes.
and they did a live, like an interview on screen, three of them together. They'd all been abused by the same gentleman, but bizarrely, differently, each one of them had a slightly different outcome in terms of the results of their proceedings through the criminal justice system. And I remember we all sat on the sofa. It was a Friday night or something like that, and we was flicking through the channels as you do, choosing what to watch. And I said to my wife, "Oh, we'll put this on." And my wife said, "Are you sure? That seems a bit sort of, near the mark, so to speak, as we say. And I said, no, I'll be fine. And the program came on, we watched it, and more it unfolded, and they all spoke about their disclosure and things like that. And one of the gentlemen was talking about how he called the NSPCC over here. Now, my sort of through my growing up and things, when you're at school, they teach you about sort of organisations like that. But it's always as if it's for children. I wasn't really, even though if I thought about it as an adult, you'd probably think, yeah, okay, fine. But anyway, they put a picture up on the screen of the building of the NSPCC, and this gentleman was telling the viewers that this is who he contacted when he first disclosed. And that was probably the first moment it gave me a, well, who do I call sort of moment. It gave me a, the light at the end of the tunnel was suddenly on. And it was kind of like, okay, subconsciously, okay, if it's my time and I'm ready, then I'm going to call them. Okay, so that part's now in place, so to speak. A few nights later, I was in the kitchen tidying up from dinner, and my wife just called out and said, look at this on my phone, this is really bad. And it was basically during COVID that there was a lot of grooming online, where older siblings were being groomed by predators worldwide to perform certain things, do certain things with the younger siblings.
Yeah.
And my wife said, this is terrible. This is awful. Look at this. And so I just came through and said, that was me. And, that was it, really. I mean, it all sort of collapsed around us, really, more than anything. We stayed up till sort of 2, 3 in the morning talking, and then a couple of days later I said, okay, fine. Not as easy as that, but, I said, I want to contact the NSPCC. And I suppose in a way that was a bit of a lifeline, really, because bizarrely it's one thing telling somebody for the first time. It's one thing telling somebody from an organisation that knows and understands and is going to offer you support. But then, it's a completely different kettle of fish telling the police or the authorities. And I think subconsciously I knew what was going to be the process and how it was going to go. And when I spoke to the NSPCC, they just sort of said, we're going to need to report this. Are you okay with that? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. So I think I sort of worked that bit out and joined the dots a little bit. That was going to be the process. And for that reason, it sort of gave me a little bit of a stepping stone. It just made it a little bit easier for me to sort of say it out loud. And then it progressed from there.
So was he ever charged with what he did to you?
No.
No. Yeah. Interestingly, that is not uncommon. Although the experience you had should never have happened, Keith.
No.
Reality for you and survivors like us and others watching who have not ever had people be brought to justice for their criminal behaviour towards us, it also indicates to me that perhaps you're here doing this and living this life to maybe give others hope who have not been able to come to terms with what happened in terms of their abuser never being brought to justice. So we don't always realise why things work out or don't the way that they do, but I always like to hold the hope in that regard. And also just to validate you, any trigger or flashback or feeling that comes to mind about the abuse is simply your mind confirming and validating, yes, you are correct, this did happen and it never should have. So just breathe that in.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I've had a couple of people anonymously approach me through social media and things, and a couple of other people that are, closer to home, let's say,
Yeah.
who have had similar situations.
Mm.
And through me, I don't openly talk about my abuse. I don't, with people I know. I've got no problem in saying that it happened. And if I'm struggling on a certain day and the person that I'm speaking to doesn't understand why that is, I've got no problem in sharing that, because to me, you know, that's my story. And you know, I think the more I can, the more you can say it, I suppose, the less hold he has. And I think there are many other people out there that can relate to this. And it's not just, you know we was taught in school like stranger danger and all that sort of thing, and be aware of all those sort of people. And it's under your own roof, so to speak. um, so yeah, but no, there is, it's difficult, it's hard. But I'm 4.5 years or so on, and you know I still I can still feel inside, um, the weight and the heaviness of before I disclose that that's not there.
Yeah, that's great. And that's the hope, isn't it? That for our wonderful survivor family who haven't yet found their voices, when the time is right, and they do, that weight gets lifted, because I think we can often carry a backpack full of self-recrimination and guilt and, self-blame. And really, that's partly why I started handing the shame back, because really, as survivors, we need to be complicit in handing the shame back. It never belonged to us. We were children. We didn't know. So, Keith, we're finishing up, but do you have any advice, please, for any perhaps survivors that are new to remembering their story or coming forward with their story? Anything you would advise that helped you?
It's very tricky because I understand that I had quite a small family unit, and I was very lucky because my family unit supported me 100% in my disclosure.
Yeah.
And I know that's not the same for everybody. I know it doesn't land the same for everybody. Um, but as hard as it seems, at the beginning, I would say that there is light at the end of the tunnel,
Okay.
and take all the support you can get. Really,
Yeah, I love that. Hey, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. Please stay right there, Keith. Audience, you know, it's really humbling to sit with a survivor like Keith and hear his story, and hear how he's managed to traverse his way through this. It's never easy, as he said. He's managed to do it, and every day may look different to the one before or the one that's coming. But in the meantime, fabulous ones, I see you, I stand beside you, and I believe you.